Welcome! Minor Pokemon tangent behind us, we are back in our Souls Challenge runs, which resumes this week with Dagger Only runs of all the Souls games. Except still no Bloodborne. Sad. And no Sekiro. So, I roll up a character, name her Knives, but spelled in the weirdest way I can think of because it entertains me. I do take a look at starting gifts. Providential Ring is usually the way to go because it increases drop rate, but maybe something else? Is that Brightwater? You can choose 3 Brightwaters as a starting gift? I'm such a moron. And I start the run! So, what does Daggers Only actually mean? Well, for the sake of the challenge and my own interest, Daggers Only means I can only deal damage to enemies with daggers. Other things, like consumable buffs or non-direct damage spells, are allowed. So, Turpentine, Enchant Weapon, and the ever-memeable sticky white stuff are all on the table. Probably not necessary for Demon Souls, but it will keep me engaged, and that flexibility will really help in the games that are actually difficult. Also, shields are a thing I can use now. I won't be blocking, because Mama may have raised a fool, but she didn't raise a coward that engenders passivity. But parrying is a thing. I am not good at it, but maybe it'll find a use. I also need to repair weapons in this run, and worry about actually upgrading my dagger, which we'll get into. Don't you worry, because it's a whole thing. And we arrive at the first optional boss. Killing this boy doesn't give anything too exciting, but I was admittedly embarrassed at how quick I died in the sorcery only run. So I do kill him, and get a bunch of smithing ingredients. Okay. Not bad. Talk our way through the Nexus and confirm the shopkeeper doesn't have anything I care about, but for real this time. And it's into World 1-1. I mostly just run through here. Nothing that exciting I need, and the only thing I get from fighting enemies is practice at parrying. Which I desperately need, but I do refuse to admit it. I arrive at the Phalanx, and it's time to show off what not using magic and some pine resin on a dagger can do. Yeah, not so hot now, are ya? Just keep cutting. You wasted 45 minutes of my life, you stupid! And the first boss is dead. So very dead. And that means Frake's apprentice arrives back in the Nexus, and we can buy Enchant Weapon to use as a renewable weapon buff, so we don't have to worry as much about consumables. And Enchant Weapon is strong. Maybe even too strong? I decided to keep it on the table though. Enchant Weapon scales off my magic stat, which is something I won't be buffing at all through this playthrough, and I might need that extra damage to take out some boss later on. Arrive at the Tower Knight, kill his little archer buddies, and it's time to take down the main guy. Sorcery made this fight pretty easy. Let's see how daggers go. Holy crap. How is that dealing that much damage? I know I have Enchant Weapon, but lordy, I one-cycled the boss. That's absurd. Okay, I am gonna keep using Enchant Weapon, but spoiler, the damage will be dropping off pretty significantly, and that extra damage is gonna be important for some future fights. Not this fight though, not even a little bit. Into World 2-1, and I get through everything with very little difficulty. I have a piercing weapon and enchant weapon. That's basically tailor-made to cut through these minor boys. I do need to be careful though because I don't have a lot of FP, and I don't currently have any FP restoring items. And I'm not careful, so I run out of FP before reaching the spider demon. So this fight takes way longer than it needed to. I do find out that this boss doesn't seem to resist fire damage, or not by much anyway, because my resin does increase my damage by a pretty decent chunk. But because I'm dealing less damage than I should be, I have to run back and forth in this corridor to dodge his fire barf attack. Eventually the spider goes down. Seriously, is my own stupidity going to end with me hating every boss in this entire game? I briefly dip into World 4-1 to try and get some blade stone for my dagger, except it goes real bad, so I bail and head into World 3-1, which was where I kind of originally intended to go. Here I can get a bunch of stuff, including Mercury Stone, that I wanted to use later to upgrade a dagger into the Mercury upgrade path. This ends up being a complete waste of time, but past me doesn't know that yet. I die a couple times to fall damage, because I'm stupid, a couple times to debatable hitboxes, and because my dagger range is shorter than this man-ball's sword range, I guess? Good thing I can skip a bunch of the level by rolling through the ballista trap. I don't even remember the correct way through this area. The boss here is still pretty easy, with or without enchant weapon. My damage and attack speed are pretty solid. I am starting to feel the lack of a range, though. After the boss, I pick up the baby nail, a knife that deals terrible damage, but a decent amount of plague buildup. I think I'm going to use it later. I don't, and shouldn't. Into World 2-2 because it's time to fight the Flame Lurker. I take the drop shortcut and face off against the boss, who wrecks me because his hitboxes are bad, his dodges deal damage, and even with enchant weapon, my damage is not good. Okay, so I die several times, and that means I need a plan. I head through the long way to meet up with Patches, who gives me the flame resistance ring after some coercion. Back to Flame Lurker, and I die, enough times to exhaust my entire supply of healing grass. Flame Lurker is going to be a later problem, I see. Except no, I'm stubborn to the point of stupidity. While slaughtering enemies in Boletaria to refresh my grass supply, I do some Googling, and Google is right. I have a dagger. I'm a rogue. Why am I trying to 1v1 the Flame Lurker? Time for some subterfuge. I head back into the boss arena, but this time I have the Thief Ring equipped. This ring makes it much harder for enemies to notice you, and that includes bosses for some reason. It's most notable in the old hero fight we'll get to later on, because he's blind, but I can also use it here. The Flame Lurker can see me, but if I correctly obscure his vision with the pillars around his arena, he will just eventually forget I'm here or something? He goes back to his starting position, and I can buff my weapon, run in to get some hits, and repeat. I do this several times, and he's near death. By the last point, he refused to forget me for some reason, so I had to briefly fight him fairly, but that does bring him down. And then to everyone's favorite boss, the Demon Dragon. A puzzle boss, except the solution sucks, and the puzzle sucks, and it takes a while, and it's boring. I struggle in this fight a lot in the sorcery run, and I continue to struggle a lot here. Turns out daggers are not equipped to clear rubble. Who knew? And enchant weapon does absolutely nothing. I'm guessing the rubble breaks based off weapon damage or poise, something like that, so my weapon being a dagger means no, this rubble is not breaking. I eventually lean on getting the boss to attack the rubble himself, which is pretty fiddly, but does eventually get me to the first ballista, and then I get incinerated in phase 2 of the fight because he no longer punches, he just breathes fire. Okay, so those of you listening closely to the rules I set out may have noticed my very precise phrasing of one key section. Daggers only means I can only deal damage to enemies with daggers. Yes, that precision was very intentional, because these pillars are not enemies, so I'm perfectly free to use this pickaxe to clear the way without breaking the rules. What a convenient loophole in my otherwise ironclad rule set. Look at that. Both ballistas fired, and I re-equip my dagger for the last few hits. That's one world down. And it's back to World 4-1. I definitely appreciate the design of these rolling skeletons when I can just shoot them from a distance. Even a weapon with any range to it would have been okay, but with only a dagger it's a surprisingly tight window to hit them and stop their rolling without taking damage first. So I appreciate the design of them considerably less. The Adjudicator fight at the end is still really easy. How quickly he buckles over so you can hit his bird head seems to be based on the number of hits rather than damage or poise, so a dagger is actually a really good weapon here. Wait, why does he have a bird for a head? More running through World 2 in the hopes of getting Mercury Stone and clearing another level. Except the boss, the man-eaters are really rough with Dagger Only. The narrow walkway, combined with their charging attack, makes it difficult to stay safe, which by itself wouldn't be too bad, except my dagger damage is bad. So by the time the second one comes out, I still have a lot of HP to chip away at the first one. My weapon reach also continues to be a problem. Let's dip and get some progress elsewhere. Into the domain of Reapers, and I die a couple times. These pillars should really stop the sweeping ghost lasers, but they don't, or if they do, it's way more precise than it should be. Good thing killing these Reapers kills all the connected ghosts and gives us a huge amount of souls, so I don't really mind repeating some sections. And the old hero is another boss that I can stealth, although this actually feels like intentional game design, as opposed to the Flame Lurker who just gets weird when he can't remember you're there. I get to use my Mercury Dagger to inflict some poison for the first and only time in this run. Poison deals consistent, if low, damage throughout the fight. Mixing that with the occasional cheap shots sees another boss down. And then it's the moment we've all been waiting for. How is he going to kill the Storm King with only daggers? He's not, because there is no way to deal any damage to this boss with a melee weapon. Womp womp. But that's fine. I knew that going into this run. And it means I can finally show off the gimmick sword you're supposed to use in this fight. It's not very fun, but it is very cinematic. It is still funny to me that this takes longer than just shooting the boss with Soul Ray repeatedly. Then I spend way more time than is reasonable getting Bladestone. See, Bladestone lets me upgrade my dagger into a sharp dagger. Or, more accurately, a new dagger into a sharp dagger, because only a basic dagger can be upgraded into the sharp path. And the item that lets you do this are all rare drops from rolling white skeletons or dual-wielding black skeletons. It's not fun, it's just stupid, and I will also not be explaining how weapon upgrading works in this game, because it's also not fun, and there's a whole chart involved. No. I upgraded my dagger to Sharp plus 5. That's all you need to know. Into World 5-1, and that's not hard. But the stupid Dreglings with torch spears are surprisingly annoying to deal with when my reach is that bad. Good that this boss is a joke because I'm really over-leveled for this area, so my damage output way outstrips any ability this boss has to fight. And then it's into the Poison Swamp. It's slow, most of the enemies aren't worth fighting, and it takes 3 tries to get to unlock the shortcut. I always put off World 5 in my playthroughs, and this is why. Even over-leveled, this area is just a slog. The boss is fine. My reach is bad, but my damage is good. Until the final area of World 5, and I'm up against Estrella and her boy toy girl. I hadn't really thought about how to fight him. I can't just spam fire until he dies this time. Although he does have a big weapon. I wonder if I can parry him. Yes, and wow, that extra critical hit damage daggers get is hefty. No, don't heal. Fine, I'll parry you again. Goodbye, girl. And goodbye, Estrella. Back to World 3-2 and the Man-Eater fight, which goes way better. The plus 5 Sharp Dagger combined with Enchant Weapon is actually dealing enough damage that I can kill the first Man-Eater not too long after the second one spawns. Assuming they'd stop flying about, not fighting me. That's better. And bonus is the Man-Eater soul will let me evolve a dagger into the Needle of Eternal Agony. Except no, because that's actually a thrusting sword, which thankfully I knew beforehand. Thanks, Vexter Life, assuming you're actually telling the truth about that. into the Mad Monk's tower, and I forgot to go offline, so a real player got summoned. Well, joke's on you, because I died like an idiot before I even reached the arena. Second time I do remember to go offline. And the old monk doesn't seem to know how to dodge daggers? Weird. More running through Boletaria, nothing interesting, and I reached the Penetrator, the most normally named boss ever. No helper this time, because I couldn't be bothered to open his cell. But that's fine, this boss isn't too bad. Although the delay on this attack means I keep dodging way too early. All that is left is the final run to the final boss, which isn't too bad. Even the 3 red phantoms take less tries than sorcery. I mean, I still die a couple times, but only a couple. Into the boss, and it's even easier than sorcery, which actually really surprised me. My magic is still at starting level, and I don't have warding, but I guess decent armor and protection does the job. And for reasons unclear to me, King Allant gets stunned by dagger attacks. So, my long, fast combos deal huge chunks of his health. He goes down so fast, it's actually kind of baffling. I wasn't expecting this fight to be hard, but that was just pathetic. I never even used the Mercury Dagger or Baby Nail, because the status buildup they offered just wasn't worth it. The fight was over too fast. Alright, well, after a brief tip down to the old one and a one-sided fight with Goo Allant, and that's Demon Souls. That was a wild ride. Like, it was never difficult, but there were some actual challenges baked in there. And then some fights I expected might be difficult that just weren't. Huh. Well, let's hope that luck will continue in next week's episode in Dark Souls 1, Daggers Only. Seriously, why do daggers stun NPCs so effectively in this game?